Hello and welcome to our peers talk. Today we have a special guest to speak about open source technology. Kalinga Gunawardana is here and I warmly welcome Kalinga, a good friend of mine, to speak about and discuss about uh, what is open source. And I thought you are the right person to speak since you already have your own open source product, which is Workplace. So before starting whole discussion, Kalinga, can you give a introduction about yourselves that our audience will get to know about you?
Hi, thank you, Dinushka, for having me for your great podcast. So my name is Kalinga, and I'm sort of an entrepreneur as well as an academic. I teach at the university, plus I build products, and we are running a company, a tech company in rural Sri Lanka, probably 200 kilometers away from the capital, for the last 12 years. So we build products, we build games, and we do some little bit of a services as well. So that's pretty much about me. And yeah.
And Kalinga, starting with your Workplace product, uh, you got, I mean, you said that it's open source, right? Can you tell us what is open source mean and, for people who like what made you think differentiating, I would say, differentiating from proprietary software to open source?
Right. So open source, in the sense as it sounds, it's basically, revealing the code that behind the application into the public. So it's kind of a new thing, and a kind of a ridiculous idea as well. Like, if you build kind of an open, if you build kind of a proprietary product, why we need to make it open, right? So um so to your question, the answer is, like, we are simply opening the code behind the application to the public. So that's basically open source. So in the open source world, there are a number of ways to govern this thing, which is, through various licenses and various business models are there. So it's an interesting, valley to experience, right? So the open source valley. So that's basically what open source is.
Calling it too deep into the right to use, modify, and distribution, which is something
Yes.
a proprietary. For example, if I'm a software developer, I built something which is my creation, which is my proprietary right. So whereas in open source community, like once you give it to the community, whoever who receives is able to use that source code, which is the software, which is the coding behind that product, service, a product particularly, and also to modify it, and also to use and benefit the developer and to redistribute as well. So I
Yeah.
think the audience would love to hear from you, particularly when you decide that look, my proprietary, which is my own creations, I'm giving it to the open source community. So that what is your economic model? What is your gain on giving up your proprietary rights?
Right. So this is a very nice time to make products open source, right? So, early days, um, we had, still we have things like SaaS, software as a service model, which is like, you basically renting the technology for your work. For an example, if you're paying per user per month pricing, you're basically renting their product, and building your infrastructure or your data set on top of their platform, right? it's fine, it's fine. But the problem is, let's say if it's a large corporation, so the cost of SaaS billing will exponentially go high, and because of because of the users and because of the pricing, right? But enterprises can't reduce the cost if they have like exponentially growing cost of SaaS billing, right? So that then the other workaround is to get self-hosted products into their companies and run the things from their own. But when it comes to the business model of the open source that we have at Worklens, there are one primary way is to release the product into their own tenants, our users' tenants, or their own servers as a self-hosted, or we can call it as on-premise solutions um, to their need. So that's then we can give the support, and we can give them the different level of service level agreements for the benefit of their work. But when it comes to the other model that we can have is like if anybody can't host it on their own, they can use our cloud solution as well. And the other thing is, the other economic model that what we are thinking is to create plugins, which is actually extending the existing platform into numerous industries by third-party developers, like probably the integrations, probably the security features. It can be a plugin, and we can extend the platform on top of it. So, which is actually kind of nice thing, because since we are living in Sri Lanka, so we we need to understand our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, also the threats. So, as developers, as engineers, as innovators. So if you want to offer good things to the world, I think open source is one of the best way that we can offer good things to the world, right? So it's actually opening our code, opening our innovations to the public, and lot of talented engineers, a lot of talented coders, thinkers can collaborate with us to build better products. So which is kind of a nice thing, right? So
Just
that's
to
what we are currently.
just to summarize what you said that in your economic model, because you see you are a software development company, and the reason you wanted to make it open source is that you can provide certain services for enterprise level customers on premises, and second would be the cloud services that you can offer to them, right? Third would be to provide plugins, right?
Yeah.
So those are the main reasons that, or the economic model that you basically built in this open source sort of environment, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
moving to that, now it's you as a developer or a software development company or a software service company that gets. So if you consider enterprise level, right? So you were earlier addressed the issue of the reduce, they can reduce substantial cost element from that, right? And other than the cost element, what should on enterprise level company should look for to obtain open source solutions? And can you give a certain insightful thought of that? You're looking at the side of
So
yeah.
for the enterprises, they can think of the you know the licenses, right? Probably the open source licenses might little bit tricky actually, but for enterprises, they might need to have kind of an understanding about the licenses. Plus, if the original vendor can dual license it for the specific enterprises, that might be the best way. So then they can have the best of both worlds, meaning like the a lot of people are improving the product at the same time from the community, while the companies can get the benefit from the open source code into the enterprises with a different license, which is kind of a good thing. right? So these things
Yeah,
like we can that's probably the way.
the way. So and also like bringing the topic of licensing. So I would like to explain if you can, right, briefly explain about two license, basically the copyleft license of open source and also the permissive license. So what's basic difference between those? So I know there are different types of licensing also, but those two are mainly is commonly used license categories, right?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm
Yes, yes, you're correct. So open source licenses are a little bit tricky, as I said early. So it's a lot, it's a quite a big spectrum, which is having one end is actually the copyleft licensing, meaning, whatever the things that you do or whatever the things that you modify, you need to release to the public, right? The other thing is the permissive end, which is the, you can modify the code, you can use it for, commercial or any use, but you don't need to release the code. Both of these ends have their own pros and cons. So at Worklens we selected AGPL FRO GPL license, which is actually uh, we think it's good for us because we are running our own SaaS model as well, a cloud solution plus self-hosted versions. But for, let's say if it is a developer licenses, let's say, if you are integrating with the developer products or internal products, might be AGPL might not be the best way, so they can go for the permissive licenses. So that's basically the two ends of this licensing, right? So
so for
so it depends
audience.
on,
No,
yeah,
for audience. So you basically your workplace product comes under the category of AGPL, right? After
that's
General
correct.
Public License. There's a
Yeah,
copyleft license. In
yes,
return, what you get is the community should provide the amendments or the modifications that happens to your source code so that it builds and it validates,
yeah.
right? Right. So, and also moving to the another area of discussion is how about the context of security in terms of using open source softwares, a security
So
threat, or how do you think the organization should consider on that aspect?
So security threat is actually, rather than going for the proprietary product, it might be the best way to go with open source to a certain extent because the code can be audited by thousands of people, and these guys can, improve the security measures inside of the product. So rather than going for the proprietary products, but I'm not saying it's like 100% correct argument, but it's having its own pros and cons. But to a certain extent, I don't think security problems will be the decision factor for going for the open source, because there are a lot of good open source projects out there, like using by millions of billions of people. One of the very good example is the WordPress. So WordPress is 100% open source product. So I think more than 40% of the world web is um, on WordPress. Probably my number is wrong, but majority of the worldwide web is actually on WordPress, which is, that's the power of the open source. The distribution is a key. So we can distribute this product into a lot of people, millions of people. So, rather than going for 100 people, it's going for millions of people. So that's million feedback rather than 100 feedback. So if you want to have the security measures, that's not 100 security measures, that's millions of security measures, right? Millions of use cases how to improve our security inside of the product, which is a really good thing, right?
Right. Karin, another thing that I want to discuss, particularly with regard to IT development, and this is like an attitude towards many of the organization, which is this is my creation. The concept of the proprietary nature, which is to say that why would I give the freedom of modification, using, and the context which I created. Now, just to address, because since you're an entrepreneur, I want to ask you sort of the not the economic aspect, but also the this the sense of you looking into the problem, how you define this intellectual property context in open source. Now, you wanted to build something, and I make
Yeah.
it public, and still I won't retain my ownership. Like something like creation of intellectual property, but also getting the feedback that, as you said, that the security features would be increased. A lot of validation can be done through open source products. So, my question is like the psychological aspect of it. People want to retain their ownership. That they wanted to keep the intellectual property. They don't want to compete, and those are like the basic business sentiments. So how would you think that would you as entrepreneur, since you have see it, what's your insightful thought on that?
You know, when it comes to these kind of aspects, right, we need to understand why we are building products, right? So the products needs to, is it for hundreds or is it for millions or is it for billions, right? We build products not for thousands but for millions, right? To go for millions, we need to find a strategic way to do that, right? So there are compromises on that. That is totally fine. If they are not paying for us for open source code, that is totally fine. But feedback is much more important. Distribution is much more important. Plus, we are giving good things to the world, right? So before we are dying, we are offering good things, right? Even now, like there's a thing called bus factor. What will happen if you hit by a bus, right? What will happen to the people who are using the product, right? But now the users can't, they don't want to worry, because if we are hitting, we all hit by a bus, then the other day they can use our open source code and run the product from their own. So that's kind of a security and assurance will come automatically for an open source product, right? So you know open sourcing is not, we are not 100% focused on the money, like that's a different story. We need money, that's but it's not the first. The first is to make an impact into the teams, the productive organizations, and making productive organizations in the world. So that's our, let's say, the work lens can be a product that we can use in the government, right? We actually speaking with couple of government institutions at the moment, right? They will definitely use it. If they are increasing their productivity, as a country, as a world, we are improving our productivity as a whole. If you are not open sourcing, we cannot do that, right? So that's one of the benefits that we are now looking at, right? It's not the money, it's something else. Yeah, I hope you can get my got the
Yeah,
answer,
I
right?
completely taken your point, and I'm basically thanking Kalinga for joining with us today and providing us insightful thoughts about open source and how it affects basically the economic model one should consider.
Yeah,
And we wanted to make this discussion and to continue this discussion, so that based on the comments that we have, we will improve our peer stop discussion. So what we want is to see the insightful ideas, and to how to see to to grow Sri Lankan business and also IT community, to see how exactly we can solve problems. And this initiative is basically for that purpose. So I'm again thanking Kalinga for joining us with us today, and we will see again. Is anything else that Kalinga you wanted to add to the audience or to
yeah.
discussion?
Congratulations of on your first podcast.
Yes.
Okay.
And then see, we'll meet again with another discussion like this. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.